Good morning. Joining us now, you know this guy, friend of the show, Tom Fitton, president of Judicial Watch, is back in studio with us, Tom.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Really want to talk to you about the Kavanaugh hearing because you were in the room. How did you get in the room?
Oh, I got a ticket from the committee.
Nice.
So the majority side had 8 or 10 tickets. The minority side, led by Senator Feinstein, had 8 or 10 tickets. So Alyssa Milano was invited by Senator Feinstein. I was invited by the majority.
Very, very nice. All right. Having been in there, I'm sure the atmosphere in that room was so much different than what we saw on television. And I also listened to it on radio for part of the time. I like to do both because I think you get a different impression when you watch versus when you just listen. So I did both. What was it like, though, being in that room? Because you could not see either one of their faces, I would assume. You saw the backs.
That's right. It was incredibly tense, and it would be difficult to overstate how tense it was. There were supporters of Judge Kavanaugh there, obviously, and those opposed. All the senators were there, dressed in their, and behaving as best they could. And full of staff, so it was a small room. So it was a real hothouse, and it eased up once the testimony began. The witness sounded okay initially, but I've had a lot of meetings where you talk to witnesses or you talk to whistleblowers, you talk to people who have got sincere and emotional concerns seemingly about an issue, and you leave the room and you're thinking, why did we have the meeting? That's not going to go anywhere because there's nothing there.
Right.
And I think that's what happened with this witness, despite all the noise. All the noise has been a distraction from the fact that she didn't have much to back up what she said, and on further reflection, there's that she may have been misleading the committee on certain key issues.
No, never.
So, Tom, we want to talk about some of these new allegations that have come out against Kavanaugh. Most recently, there was a New York Times story that came out last night. They obtained a letter from Kavanaugh to his friends organizing a trip to Beach Week. And in the letter, he says, we have to warn the neighbors that we're going to be obnoxious, drunk high school kids. I guess the idea here is that this is contradicting his claims of not being a heavy drinker. What do you make of this?
He seemed to testify a lot of how much he liked beer, and sometimes he drank beer too much. I didn't see anything contradicting that. This is desperation. This is the New York Times, the paper of record, trying to make hay out of a letter a 17-year-old wrote about having parties in Maryland, on Beach Week. It's petty, it's absurd, and it shows you it's not necessarily moving the goalpost. It's desperation by the left, who's trying to destroy the Kavanaugh nomination. And anyone trying to find any rationale behind this, the rationale is just destroy the guy, make sure that he doesn't get through. So, the theory is that the Democrats win the Senate and make it virtually impossible for the president to fill the seat subsequently.
How much does this have to do, though, with getting him in a perjury trap?
There's no perjury here. This is just silliness. It is so frustrating to see the media with their allies on the Hill, because this is a liberal effort, just walking lockstep on fraudulent issues. There is no perjury. There's no temperament issue. I saw Hillary Clinton yesterday talk about the temperament issue. She doesn't have an original thought. This is all talking points that have been spread out among the left. And I tell you, one thing I did notice at the hearing was when I walked into it, I had to walk through a phalanx of protesters that were there illegally, that were there to intimidate senators, staff, and attendees of the hearing. And I'm not intimidated by it, but it looks like some senators were, like Senator Flake the next day, and they were specifically targeting, Mary and Amber, the elevators of the Senate office buildings. Surprise, surprise, there was an assault on Flake at the elevator.
And I find that interesting. We were just having that conversation that I don't understand how someone who can get into the members-only elevator, how does that happen? I don't understand how that happens. Isn't that dangerous?
No, where's security?
Well, the elevators, where the elevators are. The members don't only stick to member-only elevators.
Well, now.
And they hang out in the elevator banks. A few of them are going into the elevators and refusing to get off that day. So they had to be removed by the police. So this hearing was, again, they had the air of violence and intimidation in the Senate hallways as this hearing began.
You mentioned Jeff Flake. He also was at the same event for the Atlantic Festival yesterday that Hillary Clinton was at, and this is what he had
I
to.
wasn't invited.
Well, neither were we. So, but you're here today. I mean, so
You're
you
in
got the
good
better.
company,
You got
Tom.
the better
Better-
invite.
better outlet, that's for sure.
Here's Senator Flake saying almost kind of what Hillary said.
I told my wife I hope that I would sound that indignant if I felt that I was unjustly, maligned. But then it went on, and the interaction with the members was sharp and partisan, and that concerns me. And I tell myself, you give a little leeway because of what he's been through. But on the other hand, we can't have this on the court. We simply can't.
The man's been on the court for a dozen years, hundreds of opinions. He certainly has a judicial temperament. And to say that in these circumstances he's supposed to behave like a little schoolboy is just baloney. And I'd like to see Senator Flake complain about the behavior of the Democrats who are looking at this man. I witnessed this in the hearing. Of course, it doesn't come through on TV. They were smirking at him throughout most of his testimony and questioning. And he responded in kind.
I'd also like to see the Republicans then call for an impeachment of Ruth Bader Ginsburg because she's very partisan. And if we can't have that on the court, let's not have it on the court. More with Tom coming up, 7:44 on WMAL. 7:47 here on Mornings on the Mall. We're with Tom Fitton, president of Judicial Watch, who was in the room when they did the questioning of Brett Kavanaugh. And you were also there for Christine Blasey Ford's testimony as well, right?
I was.
Okay.
With, what was interesting? There's a guy there making too much noise as far as I was concerned. He was quiet, but he was distracting. Because I'm listening to her testimony, and this guy's mumbling and making comments, which is kind of what you might do if you weren't in a public space. It was a small space, so everything he said was quiet but distracting. And I figure out it's Senator Feinstein's husband back there making all the racket.
Oh,
Really?
Isn't that interesting?
very interesting.
So that's interesting that you were there for Ford's testimony as well. I've heard some people say that they found her very compelling. Did you feel that way? Maybe compelling, but not backed up by facts?
It was sincere, but it was a little bit odd in places. I thought the worst part of her testimony, which I think really highlighted, the concerns, encapsulated many of the concerns people have about why she was there. Someone asked her about her friend her female friend who
Leland
says,
Kaiser.
Yeah, I don't remember anything she's talking about here. I don't know what she's talking about. And she said it repeatedly, and I guess has affirmed it to the FBI. And she said, well, she has health issues. Talk about a shiv to the back.
Yeah,
Yeah,
she
yeah.
really threw her under the bus.
That was really, and I thought, well, this is where we are here. So she's not the innocent babe in the woods as she was pretending to be.
Just some of the legal questions. As far as her lawyers not telling her that the committee members or representatives would fly out to Hearst because she had such a fear of flying, which we now know is bogus. Not telling her that, is that malpractice?
Oh, it may be an ethics issue. One of the lawyers was recommended by Dianne Feinstein's staff to her, and if they were not, presuming her testimony is accurate, that she did not know about this, they were withholding potentially material information and important information about her representation, and making up stuff to keep her from testifying, which obviously is not in her interest. And they may have ethics issues, let alone malpractice issues.
They'll probably get away with it. Have you heard anything about anyone? We've heard certain senators coming out saying that, look, if anything misleading was said or lies were made while under oath during those two testimonies, not just his but hers as well, there should be repercussions for this. They should be held accountable. Julie Swetnick, Avenatti's woman who came forward, another victim, they're not even going into her claims because they think she's bogus. And are we going to see any kind of repercussions for false statements?
Well, typically you wouldn't in a private background investigation, which is the way it should have been done. The FBI promises you just tell us what you want to tell us. It's not going to come back to haunt you. Well, thanks to the left, all these so-called witnesses that come forward are subject to this type of scrutiny. It's highly unlikely they'd be prosecuted. But in the case of Avenatti's client, her testimony is so far off, her affidavit so far off from what supposedly happened, there may be call for something more substantial there.
One last question we got to run. Have you ever thrown ice at anyone?
No, I've dropped ice cubes and never thrown them at
All
anyone.
right. Well, then you're okay as far as Mazie Hirono is. You do not need an FBI
Oh,
investigation into you.
just quickly, your listeners need to call their senators, and let them know what they think about what's going on here.
Yes.
It's going to happen this week, guys.
That's right. You got to vote. That's a good point. Thank you so much. Tom Fitton, president of Judicial Watch. Always love it when you join us.